So you've been evangelizing, been a preacher. You've had what many would call, myself being included, great success. In spite of all of that, what is something that you would still like to accomplish?
I always wanted to be a missionary.
Really?
Matter of fact, when I proposed, I said, baby, I want you to know that I want to be a missionary. And I don't want you to say yes without knowing that someday that's what I may do. So she agreed to marry me with the understanding we were going to be missionaries. I got to go preach in Brazil and Canada. And I guess if you call the Virgin Islands out of the country, it's not much. Okay. I got to preach a general conference in Oslo, Norway, the Philippines, Hong Kong. Not preached in Mexico, though, or any of the Central Americas, and only the nation of Brazil in South America. I was scheduled to preach in Cape Town, South Africa, but one of the party I was going with, actually the man who's paying the ticket, the $10,000 ticket, he got injured and couldn't go, and I was going to go by myself. But yeah. One thing about going to a foreign country, you never come home the same. You're always deeply impacted by the simple faith of people that are hungry for the gospel.
Right. So is that something that you think you will accomplish that? You think you will?
Well, I'm 68. I have invitations to go preach. I haven't had invitations to stay. I had a man walk up to me and said, the Lord told me to tell you to come and take care of the work in this particular country while I'm on deputation. And I want you to pastor the church here in this. It's a self-supporting church in this particular town. And it is in an area where there are a lot of suicide bombers and pipe bombs and those kind of things. I said, what are you trying to do? Get me in the pipe bomb ministry? Well, what was crazy is just like a couple of weeks before, I'd had this dream that I'm standing at an airport, and I'm looking overhead, and I'm seeing all these foreign countries, and I got 2 suitcases in my hand, and I don't know which one I'm supposed to go to. And I tell my wife about it, and I was already started to evangelize. So what was crazy is that we get to this particular meeting, and out of nowhere, this man comes. I said, no, you can't ask me to do that. It hasn't been approved. He said, all right, we got clearance for you. He gets my name and my email address. I said, well, wait a minute. Something's not right here. How much is this going to cost me? I always said about $10,000. I said, you don't understand. It might as well be $10 million because I don't have $10,000. Well, he said, well, money's not a problem. I said, well, for you it may not be, but for me it's something I consider. And so I was kind of flabbergasted about the whole deal. So my wife and I are talking immediately after the service. We go out to eat, and that's all we can talk about. She has to get in the car, go home with. She rides home with her sister. I'm at a conference in Louisiana, and my wife goes back up to Michigan. So after church that night, I'm driving out to eat, and I say to the Lord, now God, in all my years of preaching, 40-some years of preaching at the time, I've never asked a soul for a dime. I don't plan to start now. If it's your will for me to go, you supply the money from somebody that I don't know, somebody that's not family or not one of my friends. And now, Lord, it's going to cost me $10,000 to take care of my expenses there. I got bills here in the States. If I'm going to be there for 6 months, it may cost me $10,000 for my bills here in the States. Sure. So I said, let me tell you how it's going to be, God. If this is your will. I was raised with the atmosphere. This sounds kind of sacrilegious, but I was taught that God delights in putting you on to the test, but he also delights it when you put him to the test. So I said, God, I'm taking this to be you. And if this is you, then you will let someone that I don't know, I've never met, come up to me and say, how much is it going to cost you for your expenses while you're there in this particular country? And I'm going to say, oh, about $10,000. And they will say to me, how much will it cost to cover your expenses back at home while you're there? And I'm going to say, oh, about $10,000. And they will say, I tell you what I'll do. I'll write you a check for $20,000. I say, God, you let that happen, you and me got a deal. So I go on to the restaurant. I said, well, that ought to take care of that. Yeah. So I go to the restaurant, I sit down, and I tell my sister who's there and her husband, the preachers, some other preachers, and we sit there, we're talking. The next morning, we leave. The conference is over. We leave Cracker Barrel, and we stop by the church bookstore to get some CDs or something. And my sister Ramona comes up to me. She said, Marty, do you know so-and-so? I said, never met him. She said, she introduces me to him. And so we know each other by reputation, but we've never shaken hands. She said, tell him the story about this foreign country. I said, no, there's nothing to tell. Nothing's a done deal. She said, tell him the story. I said, my wife doesn't even know everything yet. She said, I said, tell him the story. So I tell him everything about the story, except the part where I prayed.
Right.
I don't tell him that part. And there's some specifics that the man starts crying when I'm telling him the story. And he said, you know, God's been dealing with me about that same country too. How far is this town from that town? And I said, well, on the map, it looks like it's about 40, 45 miles. He said, I felt like the Lord told me to go there. And I've been given carte blanche for that country from, and he named two well-known preachers. He said, tell me, Brother Ballestero, how much would it cost to cover your expenses while you're there? And I said, oh, about $10,000. He said, how much would it cost to cover your expenses at home? And a cold chill went through my body.
I bet.
I said, oh, about $10,000. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to write you a check for $20,000. And all the blood just drained right out of me. We think it's a major deal for God to come up with $20,000. Evidently, it's not.
Evidently. Wow.
But what is so crazy, I never heard another thing from either the missionary or from that man. But it was just like God said, oh, you think it's hard for me to come up with $20,000? You think that was hard for me to put together that little scenario right there? I'm telling you, you got to trust him. God knows how to come up with an answer.
So maybe, I know you have a blog. It's BallesteroBlog.com.
The Ballestero blog, MartinBallestero.com.
MartinBallestero.com.
Martin with a Y.
All right. And so, blog, and then, of course, we talked about messages, developing messages. Can you give us some kind of insight, exclusive?
Oh, exclusive stuff.
Exclusive stuff.
I do have a couple exclusive things, yes.
All right, excellent.
This is not exclusive here. I have 3 blogs.
Okay.
I have one called The Home Missions Chronicles, which is all true stories about places I've preached. To me, the heroes of Pentecost are the home missions pastors. They take, probably wouldn't make third string in leadership in a big church. That's their A team. Mm-hmm. And yet they have good church. They're just my heroes. So mm-hmm. I write positive stories about them. I also have another blog that I write under another name.
Pseudonym. Okay.
Yes, his name is Bill Davison.
All right.
He's a little off the wall. He says things I can't get away with. I then am administrator on 4 other blogs. So I'm administrator on 7 blogs. My main blog, however, is the Ballestero blog. As far as projects, I had a father-in-law who was very astute, and his thesis for his doctorate degree was on the Godhead. I just made that available in an e-book for free. I finished that in November. I have probably 2 pages left to do my father's book which is a number of his more famous sermons, well-known or talked about sermons, including The Handwriting on the Wall, The House and Furniture of the Soul, Eagles, and Every Man Has His Gethsemane. Wow. I have put those into an ebook form, and that should be ready within just a matter of days. Oh, wow. I have 2 books, ebooks of my own coming out, that most of them are taking things from what I would choose as some of my better blogs and putting them into a book with subjects and themes in categories. Here's an exclusive. I got a call since I have been here from a Pentecostal book publisher, it's paperback, but paper as opposed to ebook. He wants me to submit a book to him. He will publish it and pay the cost himself.
Wow.
And so that was quite a generous offer.
So you're intending to use one of the ebooks for the hard copy, or?
I may be using, I don't know that I want to overlap everything. I would probably, if I give a hard copy, I'll have an exact one for the ebook so you can get either or okay. Both. Right. But I will have another one that doesn't have the same material on okay. either. So I'm one of these kind of guys that I have a hard time carrying product and saying, hey, I wrote this wonderful book. Be all coming by right here. I'm more prone to give stuff away. And so somebody else is going to have to sell it. I told you that in talking earlier that I had a hobby of making hand-tooled leather Bible cases.
Yeah.
I never sold one. I've been doing that since I was like 20. I've got probably $3,000 worth of tools sitting in storage right now. I could never get enough money out of the case, for what I feel like I got in it. And rather than lose money, I'm going to give it away so I don't lose no money on it.
All right.
It's fun being retarded.
All right. Well, I think we'll probably do it for this interview. I thank you for taking your time.
Thank you.
Again, this is Brother Martin Ballestero, and you have a blog.
The Ballestero blog, martinballestero.com.
And can you spell that for us?
Martyn. And Ballestero spelled B as in boy, Allestero.
All right. And if you do any kind of search, it'll come up, Ballestero blog.
That's right.
Thanks again for coming.
It's been my pleasure.
All right, I think we're done.
That's what I'm talking about.